Greetings ladies and gents, welcome back to the Craft Hammer. I'm your host Stefan, and in today's video we're going to be doing a small series of videos where we're going to help out you, the new beginner, on how to do a bit of the hobbying stuff for Warhammer 40k. And in this one specifically, we are going to be looking at cutting things off the sprue and also scraping off all those little extra bits that are attached. Now, before we go any further, do make sure to subscribe, give us a like, it really helps us out, and you'll be able to flip through these short tutorials and get exactly what you're looking for to make sure that you know what you're doing when you're going forward. Now, before we move forward, the one thing I have to say is do not paint your minis on the sprue. I have seen some people try and recommend that. Completely ignore those people. It is an absolute pain. You will still have to snip and scrape things off and then damage your paint, so it's a lot of work unnecessarily done when you should be taking it off the sprue, building it as much as possible. Some things you may leave off for ease of access. We will talk about doing that in a video in the future, but for now make sure that you take your model off the sprue and not be painting it here. Now, this specific sprue is from the Leviathan launch box for 10th edition, and it is slightly different than your average sprue. We do get a lot larger pieces that are more connected together. Hopefully that comes across in the video. The way this sprue is created is to make it easier for a new beginner to put things together at a quicker pace and also make it much easier when it comes to prepping the model. Now, the older the actual models are, well, the older the mold of creating the models, the more likely you will need to scrape a bit off. Since this was bought at the time when Leviathan first came out, there shouldn't be too much scraping to do, but we will look around and see what we need to get done. Now, if you're looking at a normal sprue, which I'll bring one over here from the Templar Crusaders, it is slightly different. You don't have as many large pieces on this type of sprue. It is broken up so that it gives you a lot more options, while here it is split into characters and the details are all contained on the pieces. There shouldn't really be anything extra apart from maybe a head or two that you can use to swap in and out. Now, without further ado, let's get into actually taking things off the sprue. You will need yourself a little clipper. I have seen people who suggest going to a hardware store. I'd recommend supporting one of the companies that is part of the hobby, and especially support your local game store. Make sure to get a clippers from there. It gets the job done, but most importantly, it'll help support companies within the actual hobby to make better equipment and better tools for you to use. On top of that, I'd also recommend getting yourself a little scalpel. This will be used to scrape away the mold lines that build up over time once a mold for these sprues gets to a certain age and they haven't been maintained yet. They do tend to leave a tiny bit more flash than usual, so this is what we're going to be using this for. The basic premise here is that you do get your sprue, you find the items that you're looking to take off. In this case, we'll be looking at this body up here. Hopefully I can get it properly into shot, and you do get as close as possible to the actual model, but I would recommend that if the connection point is very thick, I actually would recommend moving the clippers a bit further away, as the thicker the actual connection is, generally it takes a lot more force to get through, which then could accidentally slip into the model itself and damage it. So in this case, we're just going to move a tiny bit away from the model itself. It will have a tiny bit of flash, which we will use the scalpel to scrape away, but in this scenario the connection points are also molded to be in triangles, so there should be as little as possible when it comes to taking off all the connection. And there we go, we have one nice model taken off the sprue. Not too bad, not too shabby. Now, as you saw, the pieces themselves are laying flat on this plane here. So what are we going to be looking at when it comes to the piece that we just took off? We will be looking at how it came off from the sprue itself, and on that line itself going around, we should be able to see a tiny bit and we do in fact see it here. There's a bit of extra flash when the mold itself was pressed. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna slightly angle our scalpel and just put some tiny bit of pressure. And most of the time, it will scrape fairly easy and fairly straightforward. Give it a little wipe and the evidence pretty much should be disappeared. Don't apply too much force and don't be too aggressive on it, as you will leave chunks coming out of the model itself, which will be a lot more difficult to get rid of, and they will kind of stand out when it comes to painting the model. Where the connection points were earlier, we're going to do a similar concept where we just scrape away. Not too difficult, but do make sure that if you have a sharp scalpel, it will easily catch and try to go further down into the model itself. So do be careful to keep it at a fairly consistent level when you're scraping across. So in short, when you're clipping things, if the connection point is very thick, move a tiny bit away from the model so you're not damaging it. When you're cleaning things up, be very careful with your scalpel and make sure to go from the side, scraping it away from yourself. Those are the basics of taking things off the sprue and getting them ready. Next thing, what we're going to do is get the rest of these off the sprue and get ready for some gluing. So stay tuned for that video. Make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, folks.